Well, joining us now is the Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, as we assess the performance of the Modi government over the past 2 years. Finance Minister, appreciate you joining us on CNBC TV 18. I know you've been saying a lot of things on a lot of issues, but let me start by asking you about perhaps what is one of the most critical issues facing the economy, and that has to do with stressed assets and NPAs. PNB has just announced its results. It's the highest ever quarterly loss reported by an Indian bank. Provisions at over 10,000 crores, loss at over 5,300 crores. It's not the only one. You look at Bank of Baroda, you look outside of that, even within the private sector, it's the same story that's playing out there.
See, I think you'll have to bear with one fact, that over the past several years, the balance sheets of the banks had been stressed on account of some sectors which had been stressed. Now, to conceal that stress when it actually existed was never the best banking practice. And therefore, the RBI wanted them to make provisioning.
Sure.
The obvious impact of the provisioning would be that in the last quarter and this quarter, they'll probably have to provide for a certain category of assets. Now, this doesn't mean that these assets are gone forever. The moment these sectors revive, and some of them I can see them actually reviving, then in the quarters to come, this provisioning would have to get reversed. And therefore, we must take this as a transient phase where everything has come up front and the banks are now disclosing what the real position is. And once the stressed sectors get some element of relief on account of business cycles or because of those sectoral problems being addressed, you'll have a reversal of that situation.
So while we await the reversal, and you're absolutely right that one, of course, is the issue as far as the recognition of the problem is concerned. The markets and rating agencies are not entirely convinced that perhaps the worst is behind us. In fact, Moody's holds this out as one of the key risks for our sovereign rating as well. Can you give us an idea now of where things currently stand? The last figures that I have, which is of course as per the government's own data, the NPAs of PSBs have risen by 1 lakh crores to about 3.93 lakh crore rupees at the end of December 2015. Where do things currently stand?
The reprovisioning means that the NPAs already existed. You are now disclosing them, you are providing for them. I think if you look at each of the sectors which is responsible for this stress, for instance, the largest amount comes from steel.
Yeah.
And steel had gone unchecked because of the influx of the Chinese steel coming into India. Now, with a series of steps which we have taken, more particularly the MIP that we imposed, coupled with the fact that global prices have also moved up, I think the steel industry over the last 2-3 months has started doing significantly better. And it's only a matter of time before they start servicing their interests. And once they start servicing their interest, I think this position is capable of a significant revival. Small sector from a larger banking point of view, but an important sector, sugar. Already the prices have moved up. The series of steps which have been taken, even global prices have helped. In fact, now they seem to be threatening the aspect of inflation. And I think the sector is now in a position much better as far as the NPAs are concerned. Highways has revived. Power sector with the Uday scheme, most of the state boards, their debts have been taken over by the state governments, and therefore as the bonds are sold in the markets, I think that itself will have an impact on the balance sheets. So you have simultaneously a lot of things which are happening, and I think the reprovisioning will show higher debt, higher losses as far as the banks are concerned. But a series of these steps, I think in the quarters to come, will also enable the banks to reverse a lot of these.
So when do you anticipate that reversal, sir? I mean, what is...
Well, I don't know. I can't make a generalized comment. It will depend on bank to bank. It will depend on the quality of their NPAs. It will depend on who the debtors are, which are the sectors which are involved. But if you look at the big picture, amongst the 5-6 sectors which are responsible predominantly for this stress, I can at least see bulk of them now moving.
Okay, since you were talking about specific sectors, and I just want to talk about steel before I address other issues, there was talk about the possibility of some sort of a restructuring package. On the back of what you've seen and the recovery that you've seen in the steel sector, do you feel that further steps are needed at this point in time, or the government will wait now?
I think I won't, obviously the situation is dynamic. You have to keep watching the situation very closely. But all the steel industries which come and discuss the issue with me now, I think they are fairly satisfied with the kind of steps the government has taken, and I'm told their balance sheets have started reviving.
Okay, let me continue with banking, sir, and talk to you about the Banks Board Bureau, which has been set up by the government, in fact being held up as one of the achievements of the government. You know, they're also looking at things like credit, a pick-up as far as lending is concerned. They've had meetings on the possibility of consolidation. The first signs of that we've seen emerge yesterday with State Bank of India now seeking the government's approval for the merger with 5 Associates Bank and the Bharatiya Mahila Bank. Before I specifically ask you about the terms of reference for the Banks Board of Bureau, how quickly will the government move in terms of giving approval to State Bank of India? Because post that, they will work on the scheme of purchase, etc.
I'll tell you. Let the proposal come to the government. I read in the newspaper that the State Bank Board has given us. I had already announced consolidation as a roadmap in the budget itself. And therefore, I think the larger question that India doesn't need so many banks in the public sector, and therefore you reduce the number of banks by consolidating on some of them, and therefore let larger global sized institutions come into existence without adversely impacting upon the employees' working conditions. And if it comes to us, I will certainly look at it, and I'll look at it very positively.
You know, this has been on the agenda for a while. Even your predecessor had talked about creating these world-class institutions here in India. They didn't go much further with that. But has this been sort of done on the prodding or the nudging of the government, this move to actually get State Bank of India to,
let's be very clear,
to move on this proposal?
Consolidation was something which was a part of the Indradhanush package. Consolidation was something that I had announced in the budget. And therefore, the banks have acted. It's in accordance with the government policy. The banks have given their own opinion. If some bank has a contrarian opinion, we'll certainly respect that view and take it into consideration. But this, the government's policy being in favor of consolidation and my own views on the subject were not a matter of a state secret.
So can we expect now more banks to seek government approval, more public sector banks to seek government approval?
I'll tell you, it depends on the market situation. I think the immediate priority with regard to other banks is to get them out of the stress situation, improve upon their economic health, and then look at a possible consolidation wherever possible.
Okay. Coming back to the Banks Board Bureau, sir, what are the terms of reference for the Banks Board Bureau?
I think there's a detail, I don't have it.
We don't seem to know, because they're looking at everything. It's almost sort of operating as a quasi-regulator.
There is a written TOR, terms of reference. I don't have it immediately, and I won't be able to offhand reel out all the terms of reference. It's a fairly detailed document. I don't think it's a secret document.
Sure.
This can be certainly made public.
But overlaps with what the Reserve Bank is trying to do. They're addressing exactly all the same issues, whether it's consolidation, lending, NPAs, vacancies.
I think they've started functioning. You must now give them an opportunity to function within. It's a very responsible bureau. It's headed by it includes some very eminent people, and I'm sure they'll work within the framework of their TOR. And therefore, the question of overlapping or usurping somebody else's function doesn't arise.
Okay. Since we're talking about consolidation, let me also ask you about the possibility of looking at consolidation of somebody like SIDBI and NABARD. Is that likely? Is it on the...
I don't think in the course of an interview I'll be able to make a comment, because it's too speculative.
Okay.
Unless we've applied ourselves to it.
But could this perhaps be something that the government may want to consider?
I won't make a comment till we examine it.
Okay. Let me then move on, sir, and ask you about IDBI Bank, because the first time that you talked about the government wanting to divest its stake in IDBI Bank was to me in an interview that we did in Singapore. There seems to be a feeling that even though it is part of the government announcements that you made in the budget, that the government is maybe going a little slow given the opposition that you're facing from employee unions. Would it be fair to assume that maybe there could be some delays on that?
Employee unions have nothing to worry. The government is not handing over the management of the IDBI to any private party. I think we have a living example of the Axis Bank, which has done extremely well. The government only has a very marginal role, despite its minority shareholding in this. And therefore, freeing IDBI from the kind of constraints that you have if you are a state instrumentality, I think will do a lot of good to the IDBI itself. For example, today we are struggling with a basic question. Every private sector bank is going to the campuses and recruiting the best. When the public sector banks or the government institutions went to the campuses and started recruiting them, the courts came down on them and said, you are a state, you have to conduct a written exam with 85% marks and an interview with 15% marks. You can't go to the campus and pick and choose. As a result of which, the public sector banks started with a handicap of not being able to recruit the best from campus, which is now a global phenomenon. Now, if you free an institution in the government from these kind of limitations, I think you are doing a lot of good to those institutions.
So what can we expect, sir, and how soon can we expect
Well, you have the announcement of the government, and I stand by that announcement.
Okay, so you'll give us the outcome in your budget speech next year. But let me also ask you about some of the other announcements that were part of the budget, sir, on strategic divestments. My conversation with the Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant yesterday, he said that the Niti Aayog has moved very vigorously, those were his words, on identifying potential candidates, but the final decision will be taken by the cabinet. How soon can we expect that process to start?
You see, I'll tell you, divestment is the art of the possible. Divestment is not something which you decide and you do it. You decide to divest or privatize, the market conditions may not be conducive to it. You may have other issues relating to a particular proposal, however meritorious the proposal is. Now, therefore, this is the first time that the government policy has been widened. You have divestment, you have strategic sales and privatization, you have asset recycling, you have buybacks. And therefore, over the past policy, we have improved upon it, and therefore, all these options are today open to the government. Now, when we see an extremely volatile market, when we see a market where some sectors, the stocks have been beaten because of global prices. Now, is this the right time to divest or privatize, or is it the right time to buy back? Now, therefore, there is a lot of flexibility we now have. Once the Niti Aayog gives us a report, we'll do it. For the present, I can only tell you that we have some hotels, etc., which were left out in the earlier NDA government's privatization plan. The concerned ministries are moving very fast on it. And therefore, we'll wait for the Niti Aayog in regard to any other institution that they comment, and then we'll consider their suggestions.
But is there anything that's off the table? You talked about hotels and the government wanting to...
Well, I don't know. I don't want to...
Airline, for instance. I mean, is anything off the table from a strategic sale point of view?
I'll tell you, I don't want to make a comment on any individual company. These are matters not to speculate in the course of an interview. It's only when governments decide. I don't want to say, oh, I'm willing to consider it and tomorrow I have to eat my own words. And therefore, we would disclose only when we decide.